asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chat, believing in my own will. Rap fire, math evil, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, setting ready for that ghost kill.
Hello, Canada, and welcome to another episode of The Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. Hope you guys are having a fantastic Thursday. And we're going to start off today's episode of The Maple Pill with a couple of videos. This first one you won't find in the video description down below because I literally just found it on Twitter while I was kind of, killing 10 minutes waiting for the show to start. And it's actually why I ended up starting this episode, a minute late. Usually I'm pretty good at starting right on the dot, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But let's pull up the screen share because I know there's lots of silly videos out there of Joe Biden. But to the best of my knowledge, this is a video that just broke today on Twitter. And this one really feels like a doozy. And, if you needed any further proof that we live in the age of hilarious or we are in the clown pill timeline, I think this will do it. So this is from the Daily Wire. Biden just finished his speech and shook hands with nobody. And at first I was like, sure, okay, we'll see how this actually plays out. But yeah, that's literally what he does.
America. God bless you all.
Now, I'm pretty sure if he wasn't the president of the United States, we would just chalk this all up as elder abuse and say, hey, whoever's in charge of him shouldn't be in charge of him and we should turn him into a ward of the state. But that actually is just like mind-blowing how he holds it here for a while, too. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having imaginary friends. I'm just not sure if you should have them if you're the president of the United States. And if we're going to allow the facade or the charade, I should say, of Joe Biden being the president, I mean, at least we all should get the same amount of drugs he's getting, right? I would really love the same sort of Adderall Connect or whatever he's got. I'm just saying I would like a heaping spoonful of it as well, just to see what it's like. But anyways, wanted to start it off with that video because, again, I was just literally replaying it while waiting for the Maple Pill to start. And then I already had this video lined up and was really just going to kind of use this video as a segue into talking about inflation and where I think the average person is at when it comes to economists telling them, how the world works. Because at this moment in time, it feels really difficult to want to trust any economist, even if we're looking at, say, Bank of Canada, right? We constantly hear them predicting what's going to happen in the future to only see them miss it every single time, whatever target they set. And so I forget who this is from, but I'm pretty sure, or Paige Lavie, pretty sure she's a huge influencer and, a bit of a political commentary. So I think this is done in jest. I didn't really dive deep into it. It honestly doesn't matter whether this is fact or fiction. I think this still perfectly encapsulates where the average person is in regards to the economy, inflation, and modern monetary theory.
Hey, so you know what I don't fucking understand? This is what I don't understand. See this? See this? See that? This. This is worth $50? This is worth $5? This is the exact same piece of fucking plastic. This is the same thing. We made up these arbitrary numbers. And then we said, we can't print more or else it'll be worthless. How about just don't let it be worthless? How about just don't tell anybody or just don't let it happen? We literally made this up. This is a construct we made up. Just don't let it inflate. Just don't. People, I get inflate, but I don't. Just don't let it. Fuck. You let this happen. You let this happen. How about you just let everything else happen too? Why don't you just let stuff not inflate? Just deflate it. Hey, so you know what I don't.
So, yeah. And honestly, I look forward to her being on Prime Minister Trudeau's economic policy advisory in the near future. But I think that actually does encapsulate, really just perfectly encapsulates what's going on with modern monetary theory, where they're like, oh no, deficits don't matter. We can print whatever we want. Inflation's not a thing. And then when inflation happens, they're like, hey, it's everyone but us that's responsible for it. And it's like, well, weren't you the ones that just told us how this isn't a thing? You know, if we're all living in the world of make-believe, why can't you just make believe that inflation doesn't exist, Mr. Government? Rolling into our first blue pill story of the day, again, building upon the idea of inflation. This is from Reuters. The game is afoot. Central banks ramp up inflation fights. So Canada's not alone, you know, amongst G7, G8 nations in regards to trying to fight the good fight against inflation, which, you know, all central bankers create themselves. But here we are. Central banks are racing to get on top of the surging inflation, with New Zealand and Canada delivering aggressive half-point rate hikes this week, and the ECB on Thursday, sticking with plans to dial back stimulus this year. So I believe with the ECB, I should say, they're in the process of not like renewing or re-upping their quantitative easing, if I remember correctly. But again, if you want a breakdown of 10 different countries and their approaches right now in regards to monetary inflation, this is a good low jumping off point. And again, usually Reuters doesn't go this deep on their dives, but that was a good one. CTV News, Pat King's bail review halted when his lawyer's computer was hacked. New charges to be laid. Just wanted to kind of highlight this in case any of you are following along with Pat King. We haven't talked about him too often here on the show. Ottawa convoy organizer Pat King is facing 2 new charges the day after his bail review hearing came to an abrupt and unexpected halt Wednesday when his lawyer's computer appeared to be hacked. The details of the hacking were protected by a publication ban ordered by Justice Graham Mew, but he lifted the order this morning after hearing arguments from a lawyer representing several media outlets. So again, if you guys want to understand a little bit more, jump into this thread here, but I, again, just want to use this as a springboard to talk about, remember that time that like Give, Send, Go got hacked and, you know, thousands of Canadian donators were doxxed and, you know, it seemed like the Canadian government didn't care at all? Yeah, that's still exactly how things are playing out. I haven't heard a single politician talk about trying to punish it, right? We literally had a live streamer on, was it TikTok or Twitch or probably both, come out and essentially admit to doing it. And yet I've failed to see any sort of news stories around investigations, whether it was him, whether that was like a prank. It's so hard to know what's truth and what's fiction these days that I wouldn't be shocked to learn that that was a parody, but I haven't seen it dismissed or fact-checked as a parody. And yet I haven't seen the powers that be show any inclination towards wanting to find the culprits of that hack. Next from CTV News, Anishinaabe First Nation signed historic agreement with feds to self-govern. And, you know, I think this has been like 20 years in the making. I'm not positive this is going to be a silver bullet solution, but I hope it works out. I hope that we find some sort of recipe or pattern that can work to help First Nations find better footing, because, again, I think our current system's very broken when it comes to working with First Nations. One of my, like, you know, if I was to try and turn this into a white pill moment, I hope that we see some First Nations really embrace Bitcoin technology. And I hope we see them really drift away from fiat currencies and focus on becoming like microstates, you know, little sovereign entities set apart from the rest of Canada. And hopefully that eventually becomes, you know, a template for all sorts of reduction and nationalization and, you know, the Federation of Canada. And we start to see a lot more local government. Right. I think that local government is the way of the future if we want the future to look bright. Next from CTV News, City of Ottawa makes 558,000 fraudulent transaction. Treasurer says there really wasn't too much on this. So I guess we're just going to put this as a little note here and we'll see what happens in the future. Although highlight from the article, in 2019, the City of Ottawa was scammed of approximately $130,000 in an email scam. The Auditor General said the former city treasurer was the victim of a whaling scam, receiving an email from an address she thought belonged to city manager Steve Kinalakos. So at least it turns out that she wasn't, you know, trying to send money to some Nigerian prince. But we'll see how this all plays out. Again, just another sign of the largesse and inefficiencies that come along with government. Next, from Canada News Media, Elon Musk launches hostile takeover of Twitter for $54 a share. CBC News. It's been fascinating to see all the different interpretations in regards to Elon Musk's bid for Twitter. obviously, I've got no idea how this plays out. I don't know what sort of 4D chess he's playing, but I wouldn't be shocked to learn that this is kind of a game of chicken where either way, Elon Musk wins. I could see a version where he was like, screw it. We ran the numbers. We believe that Twitter is undervalued. And if we can take it private, we can maximize the value while also being a bastion for, freedom of speech. And let's make the $54 a share offer. However, understanding the way the world's mapped out, right? And how important censorship is to the existing regimes, I can't imagine he thought that this would just go smoothly without a hitch. So part of me thinks that, he threw about $3 billion into Twitter. He'll probably end up walking away, selling his stake if his offer is not accepted. Maybe he walks away with another $1 billion or $2 billion in net profit off the sale of that. Hopefully we then see that used to create a new social media platform to add more competition to the space. Again, that would be kind of my low conspiracy theory there. Next, this is from CBC News. Canadians too anxious about the future to enjoy the vibrant present, say economists. So economists are saying that you guys are just a stick in the mud, constantly wanting to be, ants and prepare for the future, when you should totally just be like a grasshopper and like chill, bro. So if you guys want to read what these economists have to say about why all your interpretations of reality are mistaken and why you should just blindly, party along, gorge yourself further on cheap debt, because these good times, they'll probably continue to last. And if they don't, we'll deal with that in the future. Or at least that's kind of the gist of what I got from this article. So again, if you guys want to check it out, link in the video description down below. Now, one of the things that is interesting in this article, and again, just whenever we're talking about government statistics at this point in time, is they're so manipulated that it's hard to actually interpret them accurately, right? One of the things that's pointed out in this article is, I think Canada's unemployment is stated to be like 5.3%. And I think in the US, it's like 3.8% or something, or maybe 3.6%, something in that ballpark. And in this article, they point out that, well, the US calculates it slightly different. So if we were to adjust Canada's, we're actually pretty much on par with, the way the US calculates their unemployment. And for all I know, that could be true. But one of the other things I do know is that the way we calculate unemployment these days is different than the way we used to do in the past. And so now, I'm forgetting the term off the top of my head here, but we essentially have this concept that people can become not disillusioned, but something to that effect, disillusioned with employment, and they can opt out of the workforce. So essentially, if you've been trying to get a job and you eventually just don't get it, you're determined to no longer be actively in search of employment. So again, there are statistics that show things are good. However, when, I look at things like inflation, cost of living, when I look at really small businesses and whether I think it's easier or harder today than it was 2 or 3 years ago to launch a small business, yeah, I'm not sure that everything's just, rainbow and sunshine on the prim path of government and government bureaucracy. Next from CBC News, and this brings us into our first red pill story of the day. An actor, a hockey reporter, a 12-year-old, these are some victims of BC's toxic drug crisis. And obviously, we definitely do have all sorts of, issues in Canada when it comes to the war on drugs, when it comes to overdose deaths. Over 9,400 people have died in the last 6 years since BC declared public health emergency due to overdose deaths. And I don't want to make little of any of these individuals' deaths, but what I want to highlight is whenever we see the government declare war on something, it seems like usually everything just expands, right? Like it seems like the actual chaos in that space actually expands. It doesn't contract. It seems like the amount of budgets and overhead and taxpayer dollars spent continuously expands without really seeing any results. And it's difficult to ever really understand, when do we decide to give up on these certain wars or to take a hard pivot and switch our approach? So just kind of wanted to use that as a springboard here. And again, link to this article as well as all the other articles we're talking about today in the video description down below. Next from National Post, Ted Morton, after 40 years, the Charter is still one of the worst bargains in Canadian history. Rather than the People's Party, today's progressives now see the people as the problem. Yeah, and particularly when we see this consistent narrative coming out of mainstream media and, the Liberal Party that demonizes populism, right? So I just thought this was kind of an interesting perspective, and National Post had 2 articles today I wanted to highlight for you guys, and I encourage you, jump go down your own rabbit hole here. But the second one, the Charter at 40, 10 important court cases that shape Canada's rights and freedoms. Many Canadians are familiar with R versus Morgentaler, which legalized abortion. But what about R versus Oakes? That brought us the Oakes test, right? The most cited case in charter history. So again, myself included in this, I think all us Canadians would be better served to understand, how the charter works, how laws and the Canadian government works. And I think that this is a decent little jumping off point if you've ever been wanting to look into, what cases have really impacted Canadian freedoms and impacted our interpretation of how the Charter of Rights work here in Canada. Next from the Toronto Star, MPP Randy Hillier should be censored again, says Integrity Commissioner. And what I want to highlight here in this Toronto Star article is, a new set of claims or charges against Randy Hillier is that he inappropriately used government assets, right? So I think one of the claims is that his daughter shot her announcement of running for politics out of his office, which is, a government expense, and impropriety around these things. I gotta be honest, I've got no issue with holding people to account when it comes to whether they're misusing or mishandling government resources. The only thing I'm going to point out here is I can't help but wonder whether this is an isolated incident of focusing more on Randy than it is really about, making sure people aren't abusing government resources. Again, if we want to go on a witch hunt and, find claims against every single member of parliament and member of provincial parliament and how they maybe misuse taxpayer resources, I'm down. Like, let's start this witch hunt yesterday. The only thing I want to highlight is I think only isolating on Randy Hillier is a little insincere. It actually really shows that this is more about a witch hunt for Randy Hillier than it is about, really ensuring that taxpayers are not seeing their resources wasted by government employees or members of parliament. Next, Canada's National Observer. Trudeau says genocide, the right word for Russian conduct in Ukraine. We talked about this yesterday, so I won't spend a lot of time dwelling on this, but just understand, as we double down on this rhetoric, we're painting ourselves in a corner where the only option available is going to be regime change in Russia. And, let's think about other times we've done that. I don't know, with countries like North Korea. Is the world better for creating a pariah state out of North Korea? Are North Koreans better for seeing their country become a pariah state? Not sure. Not really sure that we have taken the most successful... words are sometimes tough. Not sure we have taken the most successful path towards North Korea. I can't help but wonder if we're not doing the same thing here with Russia. Again, that's not to say that Russia's the good guys. It's not to say that I want to see Russia win this war. It's just to say, like, hey, here's some cold, hard facts, right? If we continue to demonize Putin to the point that he's this warmonger, he's this war criminal, he's committing genocide, we have to have regime change. I mean, again, you're kind of painting Putin, which the mainstream media is more than happy to, make comparisons to an animal, into a corner. Well, what happens when you corner a wild animal? Usually nothing good. So again, just wanted to highlight that because it certainly seems like our politicians here in Canada and politicians in America as well, because we saw Biden now is coming out with stronger rhetoric this week as well, where in the past he was walking back some of his more aggressive claims, saying that they were personal views rather than policy views. Next from the Western Standard, CFIB grills Finance Minister Freeland on 2022 budget. CFIB President and CEO Dan Kelly said the budget was a missed opportunity to provide relief to struggling small business owners. I would think first things first is let's just get out of the way, as the federal government. Let's actually just get out of the way of small businesses. Let's stop forcing so many restrictions, mandates, and all these different things. And again, not that, if tomorrow they were to allow completely free mobility of any Canadian citizen to, use a train or a plane or things of that nature, regardless of their vaccine status, that would fix everything. But if we actually do start marching towards normalcy, I think that we'll see different aspects of our economy return to where they once were, to a better equilibrium than the one we currently find ourselves in. Again, at this point in time, like, we have fucked up so much that I don't think that there's one policy solution that's going to fix things. But how about we don't double down on more government medication to fix the previous medication the government gave us? Next from Blacklock's reporter, wrong again at central bank. And again, this really isn't going to come as a surprise to anyone that watches this show regularly. But what point in time, do we go, hey, if your job is predicting shit and you always predict it wrong and you always have to come out with corrections and reassessments after the fact, does there come a point where we're like, maybe we need someone different? Maybe we need a different approach to how we make our predictions and models if they're always wrong. So Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem yesterday acknowledged he again missed his inflation target, the latest in a series of incorrect forecasts dating back 2 years. We are acutely aware already high inflation has risen further above our target, Macklem told reporters. And so again, that transitory inflation that we were told was totally transitory and totally don't worry about it, bro. It seems like now, well, yeah, it's probably going to be around in some form or the other till at least 2024. But again, at the same time, I thought mainstream media in the U.S. was telling us it was all Putin's fault. Well, is the war with Putin going to continue for another 2 years? And is that why we're going to continue to see higher inflation? No, I don't actually really think that is the cause. I think that Putin's just a convenient scapegoat. And 2 years from now, they're going to have to come up with a new scapegoat in regards to why inflation is still going to be persistent then, because we're not going to fix our monetary policy, right? We're all of us in this economy are too addicted to cheap debt. And the idea of going cold turkey on it at this point in time is just, I don't think anyone's willing to accept that. Not saying we shouldn't. I just don't think anyone is willing to. And so we're going to continue to see this narrative evolve for the months and years to come. Next from Post Millennial, a new Toronto Star CEO, vaccine passport system is like communism. I got to be honest, I did a double take when I saw this because this is not what I expect to hear the new Toronto Star CEO say. Now, as I looked into it a little bit more, it turns out I believe this was a comment that she made before she became the new CEO of Toronto Star. So I expect, we'll see her recant her thought crimes in the future and double down on the mainstream narrative. But Marina Gloglovac, the newly minted CEO of the Toronto Star, has publicly stated that she considers vaccine passports to be akin to communism and that she will not support any establishment that asks her for proof of vaccination. Again, this just seems like a very base take for the new CEO of the Toronto Star. So kind of nice to see, actually. But again, a little bit red-pilled on this one because I suspect that we're not going to see a completely new editorial approach to the Toronto Star. And I suspect they're going to carry a lot of the same fear-mongering when it comes to COVID-19 and the demonization of their fellow citizens who dare to be unvaccinated. Next from Blacklock's reporter, groups fear partisan inquiry. So 15 civil liberties groups yesterday petitioned cabinet for an open inquiry into the Prime Minister's use of the emergency's police powers against the Freedom Convoy. It should not be marred by partisan fights, petitioners wrote. The government may have an incentive to keep this secretive and closed, Sid Kara-Zwiebel, director of the Canadian Civil Liberties Association of Toronto. We want to avoid that. There is a need for this to be public process. And yeah, if you ever want any sense of reconciliation from the Freedom Trucker Convoy protesters and the mainstream media, politicians, the Liberal administration, this has to be done completely open, right? We need every ray of light to shine in on this. If any of this is done, underhandedly, secretively, behind closed doors, it's all for naught, right? This is just going to end up becoming a rubber stamp where the government's going to rubber stamp themselves, give themselves a pat on the back, and move on to the next narrative and the next set of emergencies to, double down on the draconian measures. So if you guys want to check out this Blacklock's reporter article, I encourage you to do so, but 100% agree with these 15 civil liberties associations in Canada. This has to be done so nonpartisan. And that's why having members of the NDP, when the NDP have essentially agreed to, backstop and support everything the Liberals do until 2025, again, do whatever you want. It may be legal, but it's not actually going to get any good results, in my opinion, if you take that approach. Next from the Mises Institute, political upheaval is not threatening our democracy is. And I thought this was a great article, really just breaking down and reframing the way we see a lot of the hysteria around populism right now. And again, like the different headlines here, I think really hit upon different factors that are drastically impacting not only America, but to a lesser extent, Canadians' interpretation of how their democracy functions and whether it's functioning in any sort of effective manner. Just want to highlight a couple of the conclusions here. While the process was a gradual one and therefore passed largely unobserved, today's historians of American politics can clearly delineate the development of the trend towards less pragmatic politics. For in a political incentive structure where candidates feel most answerable to their own party's most radical partisans, what incentive is there to compromise in order to govern more effectively? In case you are in any doubt, as a GOP strategist succinctly explained, if the purpose of the majority is to govern, then the purpose of the minority is to become the majority. Though it is obviously something must be done because any change to the status quo would threaten the collective monopoly on power they have long enjoyed. Republicans and Democrats predictably oppose even mild attempts at reform, such as ranked choice voting, let alone the more radical but desperately needed switch to multi-member proportional districts. Again, we saw originally, I forget which year it was, but one of the years Trudeau ran, right, saying the Liberals that they wanted to see ranking of votes, right, and not just first past the post. Again, not that that was going to magically solve all of our issues here in Canadian politics, but it is just interesting how, if a narrative no longer fits their primary objectives or their primary objectives evolve, they just throw out any of their past, platforms. The same way that we saw, for the last 7 years, Trudeau constantly talking about affordable housing. Meanwhile, housing's doubled in value, right? It's become twice as expensive as it once was. Next, Spencer Fernando. Justin Trudeau has often embraced the most cynical elements of populism. And as is often the case, I think Spencer really hit it on the head here in regards to some of the biggest factors of when Trudeau's use populism to his advantage, such as pandering to authoritarian leaders to gain domestic votes, populist budgets, seeking to control the media, as well as, I think there was a couple more here, demonizing minority groups in order to win votes, Trudeau's cynical populism versus Poilievre's individual empowerment. So again, if you guys want to check that out, really encourage you to do so. Link in the video description down below. Next, this is from Keenan at the Counter Signal. Why is digital IDs so dangerous? And you guys have heard me probably rant and rave about digital IDs in the past. I am definitely no fan of them. I think that they're just going to be used as one more tool to force compliance amongst the average citizen, right? The same way that I see environmental ESG scores, environmental societal good scores, I think that's what it stands for, as another form of that's going to be used first against corporations, but we'll eventually see similar principles or those exact same principles applied to the average citizen as well. And so this is a very thorough deep dive into it. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, I encourage you to do so, but we'll just hit upon the introduction here. Indeed, a simple digital ID seems inoculant enough. Innocent enough. Wouldn't it be more convenient? Doesn't that just mean I'll be able to scan my phone when I'm carded at the liquor store instead of carrying my physical ID? Would it really be so bad to have all my government documents in one place? As for privacy, doesn't the government already know everything? If not, the government, then surely ISPs have the details. While it's true that a digital ID may be convenient and privacy issues had existed long before governments around the world began introducing digital IDs, a ubiquitous form of digital ID has far-reaching and dire consequences. Again, just think about if the government had easier and more access to more data about you, right? Do you think that they would use this as a net benefit or a net detractor against you, right? Would this be used to empower you or to enslave you? I think it's pretty obvious it's the latter, right? Based upon all their actions to date. And here's just kind of a breakdown. You can find a link in that article to this tweet, but breaking down how digital IDs may impact all the aspects of your life, right? And so again, it's not like a digital ID quickly then gets tethered to like a digital CBDC, a central bank digital currency. And all of a sudden now what you've got is one ID governing your access to essentially your own resources or financial institutions and financial resources, which, in the era of Canada in 2022, we already saw the government and politicians happily invoke an Emergencies Act, arguably, in my opinion, unjustifiably, against its fellow citizens in order to ensure that they healed when the government demanded they stop protesting. Well, how much easier would it be, right, if your ESG scores out of whack to simply, restrict your bank account's ability to go buy meat, right, or go buy a gas engine, right, a combustible engine, something that uses petroleum products. We're headed in this trajectory, whether we like it or not, and the sort of fights we put up today will dictate what sort of things politicians think they can get away with tomorrow. So this is something that none of us should be turning a blind eye to. Next, from the Fraser Institute, a primer on inflation. So again, great article, worth reading from cover to cover. But this first paragraph actually really hit home just because it highlighted a fact I hadn't really thought about. Somewhat over 40% of Canada's current population was born after 1988. Therefore, a substantial proportion of Canadians did not personally experience the prolonged episode of global inflation running from the mid-1970s to the mid-1980s. Indeed, the media has basically ignored inflation over the past 30 years, decades that, until recently, have been marked by low and relatively stable inflation. The sharp increase in the rate of inflation over the past year has brought this public policy issue back to the public's attention. And that is fascinating to think that so many of us have grown up essentially in an era where inflation didn't really exist, or inflation simply meant that your money bought 2% less next year than it does today. But really, in the big scheme of things, is that the hill to die on, right? Is that something to make such a fuss over? And honestly, for a lot of citizens, for your average person, it wasn't. But as we move into this, brave new world of 6, 7, 8, and higher percent inflation, based upon the government's own statistics. And once you factor in, unnecessary things like food and fuel, like housing and fuel, then all of a sudden it expands even greater, right? And once you start getting rid of all their substitutes where they're like, oh, well, you don't need like grade A beef, you can take ground beef instead, right? You don't need this, we can supplement that with a lower cost alternative. Once we really look at things, we're actually running right now in double-digit inflation rates if we were to calculate it, the way they did in bygone eras. Next from Zero Hedge, and this is going to bring us into our first black pill story of the day. Watch Fauci admits you use lockdowns to get people vaccinated. And, really no big surprise here. It's very obvious for anyone that's paying attention. But what's interesting is still how Fauci and others of his ilk tap dance around the question of what's going on right now in Shanghai with China. And, one of the quotes he says here is, early on, China was saying, and I think accurately, that they were doing better than anybody else. Again, there's almost nothing to be said there, right? Like, does that justify then their actions, right? When we're actually talking about the draconian lockdowns that are being implemented today, right now in Shanghai, in China, and the response from US's top doctor is simply like, well, at the start, I think that they were doing better than us. Yeah, well, like, what if to make sure you had zero COVID deaths, you just killed everyone preemptively with a bullet to the back of the head? Well, then magically, COVID deaths would no longer be an issue either. But I think a lot of us would agree that, that medicine probably was worse, or like the cure was worse than the disease in that situation. And I can't help but feel like that's what we're seeing play out right now in Shanghai and other crazy states. Italy comes to mind. They're taking these crazy measures to either implement zero COVID or near zero COVID strategies, which are just impractical and endemic. Next, from Matt Taibbi, editor's note on Russian dissent, a brief announcement about a new Substack for censored Russians. So for any of you fellow thought criminals, if you've been looking for more reliable sources of information coming out of Russia, I think checking out this Substack could be a great jumping off point. So just wanted to highlight that. And the reason this is a black pill story is because, well, we live in the era where you're not, Russian TV, Russian propaganda is banned outright. Meanwhile, everything from the West is, shoved down our throat in regards to propaganda. Now, moving on to our clown pill story of the day. And I can't help, this might have got mixed up, but we might flip-flop here. But anyways, Black Lives Matter co-founder triggered by law forcing charities to disclose finances. So if the organization and the people in it are being attacked and scrutinized at everything they do, that leads to deep burnout. I just found this funny because, again, the state, right, the status, they'll eventually turn against you. regardless of whether they see you as a useful pawn today, there will come a time when they tire of you, right? When you no longer fit their narrative, their policy goals. At that point in time, they'll have no issue memory holding the fact that they used to support you, and they will absolutely throw you under the bus. Again, I think Black Lives Matter had plenty of corruption from day one, so I don't think this is just a incident of the state taking aim at a completely peaceful organization. But I don't know. I find some humor in it. Next from True North, a soldier drag queen bingo and critical race theory in the Canadian Armed Forces. Just know this is going to become more and more normalized. And I can't think of a better use of our military forces than making sure that they get drag queen bingo. Because I imagine that will make Putin, he'll just leave Ukraine immediately if he hears about our drag queen bingo initiatives here at the Canadian Armed Forces. And then from Timcast, we had a lot of clown pills today. Maybe I'm just in a humorous mood. 2 prisoners in New Jersey's all-female prison, pregnant by transgender inmate. Again, we're going to see lots more headlines like this in the future because when your sexuality or your gender can be fluid and you can just identify as you see fit in a moment's notice, I think that we're going to see a race towards inmates, people that are being incarcerated, to trying to figure out, what sexual identity or gender identity will put me in the best, living situation. So look forward to more of those stories in the near future. Now, switching gears and getting into a white pill story of the day, I feel like I must have lost somehow a Globe and Mail story. But anyways, we'll just move past it. The Zero Hedge, the war on woke capitalism has begun. And Bitcoin Miami, right? Bitcoin 2022, the conference that was held in Miami a couple weeks ago, it is definitely something that I draw a lot of hope from, right? It's one of the biggest white pill events of the year, in my opinion. So I think that this article does a great job of hitting upon some of the white pills involved. So Bitcoin is well past the here to stay phase. I agree with that. There will be no crypto ban in the developed world. Again, I think that the Pandora is out of the box. It's going to be difficult to get her back in the box. So we'll have to see them just try and destroy crypto through regulation rather than, outright just outlawing it or banning it. There can only be one. So I'm less positive that there can only be one, but I do believe that if there is only one, it's going to be Bitcoin. And I think that Bitcoin is the best thing we've got today. Number 4, there is more than an asset. It's a spiritual philosophy. Yeah, I agree with that. I think for a lot of people, Bitcoin is hope. At the Bitcoin 2022 conference, Greg Foss, who's, a popular Canadian Bitcoiner and just outspoken critic of the existing financial regime, he talked about how, at times in his life, he struggled with depression and I forget how far he went, but like depression, suicidal thoughts and things like that. And that Bitcoin was actually, a beacon of hope for him. I personally find similar sorts of resilience from the idea of Bitcoin, right? The fact that maybe there is an asset that I can hold that essentially removes the logic of violence for the state, right? So if the state can't just seize my shit, all of a sudden it needs to interact and treat me a little bit differently. It almost needs to treat me more like an equal rather than just a subservient cog in its wheels. So I completely agree. I think that this is more than an asset. It's a spiritual philosophy. And then finally, number 5, the war on wokeness has begun. And so this is in regards to Peter Thiel speaking out. We're seeing Elon Musk, making a fight for Twitter. I hope that we continue to see more and more, whether it's libertarian, anarchist, right-wing oriented individuals fighting on the side of freedom. Again, I don't think that we immediately need to start making shrines or altars towards these billionaires that are finally speaking out against woke capitalism. But hey, we're nudging ourselves. We're drifting in the right direction, I think. Next from True North, Rumble shames Globe and Mail over pressure to censor Russian content. Here's the article I was thinking about. All right, so this is from True North, but it's about Globe and Mail. And I just really appreciate the fact that Rumble is calling out the Globe and Mail. So here are emails we received from the Globe and Mail demanding to know why we aren't dutifully copying YouTube censorship. It is now common that we receive pressure from journalists demanding that we censor more. See the next tweet from Rumble's response. So I'm just going to pull up Rumble's response here, but there is a reason. Here we go. There is a reason the public has radically turned against both the corporate media, such as your outlet, and big tech, because you have arrogantly claimed for yourselves the power to decide for the public what information they can and cannot be trusted to hear and what views they can and cannot express. By stark contrast, the reason Rumble is growing so rapidly is because we trust adults to make decisions for themselves about what ideas they can express, and we trust them to make up their own minds after hearing all sides. Yes, here to that. And again, right now, I think Rumble and Gab seem to be two of the freest oriented social media platforms in existence. If you guys haven't checked them out, I strongly encourage you, get in before the wave. Next from Fee Stories, CNN slams libertarian children's book causing sales to surge. So I'd heard of the Turtle Twins before, as far as like children's books that introduce libertarian ideas and ideals and, explore even concepts like Hayek's Road to Serfdom. And, not being a kid, not having kids, I've never really felt the call to action to go buy some of their books. But when I saw this article, I was like, shit, yeah, I might as well grab a bunch of their books before, they get memory holds or made into a thought crime. So if you guys are interested in providing your kids with non-woke books, non-woke curriculums, really encourage you to check them out. I bought a couple here. We'll be getting them at the Citadel and adding them to our library shortly. And then finally, last white pill, the story of the day. This is just Jack Mahler's going into a grocery store, I think in Chicago, and showing the different ways you can now interact with the Lightning Network and use it in order to buy things and essentially participate in the economy with a wallet, right? And depending on how you set up that wallet or who you choose as your provider, which will be a non-KYC. So think about if you could essentially have a bank account without having to tell the government or the bank that you have a bank account. Would that put you in a freer position or a less free position? Well, I think we all know it's the former, and I think this is a great example of what's hopefully to come when it comes to the Lightning Network and Bitcoin. So just to highlight here from Jack Mahler's tweet, to be clear, you can spend Bitcoin or dollars. I used a Tor node, a non-custodial mobile wallet, and at Cash App to show the open interoperability of Bitcoin as a payment network. When I make payments, I spend my dollars over Lightning with Strike. Personally, I hodl. So again, this is fantastic. If you guys want to understand more, link in the video description down below. And finally, that takes us through all of our pill stories of the day. And we'll end with a meme here from Saudi Agris. So the USA police is donating equipment to Ukraine. That's nice. Now shut up. The U.S. police force has equipment suitable for wars and has so much they can give some away. Yeah, that's one of those thoughts that could keep you up at night. Like, wait, so the U.S. police forces have so much military paraphernalia, gear, and vehicles and equipment, they can actually donate it to a sovereign country in order to actually try and fight against one of the world powers. Yeah, that actually does describe the industrial complex that we seem to have today. It's no longer just the military industrial complex. We've seen it cascade over into domestic affairs as well. So always appreciate Sal and his memes. And that's it for today's Maple Pill. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, consider smashing that like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. Get really happy we made it to 1,000 subs. So I appreciate all of you that gave me that sub. If you want to follow along with me on Instagram, see me, shit posting memes. It's Matt McKeever Unfiltered. And just a reminder, in case you guys don't follow me often on Instagram, I will never just DM you out of the blue and say what's the usual one? It'll be like, hey, brother, with a hand emoji wave, being like, do you trade in cryptocurrency? I just made a bunch of money off of cryptocurrency. You should send me money so that you can learn how to make money in crypto. I'm never going to send a message like that to you ever, mainly because I've got better things to do with my time. But it turns out the scammers, they've got lots of free time, and they'd love to try and scam you of your money. So again, first of all, if all of a sudden I DM you out of the blue, that should be a red flag because I just don't DM strangers out of the blue. Second, if you do think it is me, go to the account and see, is there a bunch of other people following the account? If you're the only one following the account, again, that's usually a sign that it's not me, right? If there's a period in the name, again, it's not going to be me, at least when it comes to Instagram. So my main Instagram account is Matt McKeever 85. My other one is Matt McKeever Unfiltered. There is no period in the name. If you see a period, that is a scammer trying to scam you. But anyways, appreciate you guys making this a two-way chat. Let's pull up the chat here and see what everyone's got to say. We've got P58, we've got Aislinn, we've got Farzana, we've got that shouldn't be a clown pill, or that should be a clown pill. Yeah, I agree with you. Graham Griffin, what's up? We've got Terry. Hey, everyone. Just love how the show is starting. Yeah, the fact that literally Biden was shaking hands with either a ghost, his imaginary friend, or nobody. I don't know which way the media can spin that as being a net positive. I look forward to Jen Psaki having to try and explain that in a future press briefing. Seeing this one, Graham says, Pat King declared himself a leader of the convoy, was never officially a leader. Then again, were there any leaders? Whatever happened to that BJ Ditcher guy? Isn't he now shilling Bitcoin in Florida? So yeah, he is. He was at Bitcoin Miami. He was on one of the panels in that regard. I don't know him that well, to be honest. I think that he's been talking about Bitcoin for a while, though. So I don't think that this is like a 180 switch. At the same time, I'm not sure if he's the number one Canadian Bitcoin influencer I think of when it comes to Canada and Bitcoin. I think there's lots of great Canadian Bitcoiners out there that maybe don't have the same sort of baggage. Aislinn, Vanguard bought more shares of Twitter and resumed their position as the largest shareholder of Twitter. Oh, interesting. I didn't see that break. Appreciate you sharing that. Toronto Star CEO saying Vax Pass equals communism. Maybe she's like communism and it was a compliment. That could be. Although at least her elaborating on it, saying that she wouldn't participate in any business that did it, it's going to be hard for her to walk that back, I think. I imagine she will be forced to at some point in time, but it is interesting nonetheless. Benjamin, these clown pills, yes, there's some doozy clown pills today. I was listening to Dr. Junie Blather on about how to make children comply with wearing masks. It's agitating to listen to. Yeah, I don't envy your ears if you're listening to that sort of ridiculousness. Like I've said before, internet is for adults or under adult supervision. Adults can make their own choices. Don't piss them off. Free Faster says KP index is at 4.3. If you have clear skies at the Citadel, you might see northern lights. Keep an eye out. Appreciate the heads up. Right now, I think it's still snowing. We've got plenty of snow right now at the Citadel. I think I'm good with winter. You know what? It's like April 14th, April 15th. That should be the hard cutoff deadline for winter. And the weather should just agree to fuck off and, move into above zero temperatures for the rest of the spring, summer, and early fall, in my opinion. But unfortunately, the weather doesn't take its marching orders from me. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me for another episode of The Maple Pill. Hope you guys are enjoying what I'm doing here. Reminder, I do upload these videos afterwards to Rumble as well as BitChute, so you guys can always check them out there. And that's it. We'll be back tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I know it's technically a bit of a holiday tomorrow, but we'll still be here. We'll still be pushing The Maple Pill. And appreciate you guys, and see you tomorrow.
Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chap, believing in my own will. Web fire, math, evil, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you